What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cooke and Pat Stuart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Hey, I need to tell you something.
Oh, God, what is it?
Some time ago, we did an ad episode where we talked about how we were going to get better with our ads.
I was wondering where you were going. Yeah. We're so shit at the ads.
That's what we said. We said, we're so shit, we're going to get better, and we just didn't.
We don't. We're so full of shit. All right, well, here they are. We got 5 sponsors currently.
All right, who are they?
First is the OG. The Einzelwiener.
Oh, that knob.
The buffhead.
Yeah.
No, he's the OG. He's been with us since the start.
No, he's good.
He is going to sell you whatever you need.
Yep.
He'll get it. What you should do is contact Jason from Mindswick Dog Queer with some peculiar product, tell him you want it, and make him get it in and sell it to you. Even if you could buy it somewhere else. Just make sure he gets it in for you.
Just make that bastard work.
But in all honesty, I'd say 90% of my shit comes from him, and it's all the best stuff.
I did see some feedback on our forum where somebody was really intrigued about your handler package, the one that you got from Jason. Obviously, it works. Like, people are paying attention to the ads. That's great. Even though we're shit at this, we do a terrible job of actually trying to keep things updated. It's great to see that the people who are investing in our show are actually getting some leeway.
Yep. Mate, I've heard that your wife sells some canine products.
My wife is doing great guns at the moment. I said before that she's been supported terrifically in the United States, which has been good, but I will swing that back home and say that so many more people in Australia are doing it. And it's great to see, like, there are people finally in the sporting dog world who are starting to prioritise nutrition for their dogs. And I know them. I can see them when Narelle comes in and says, oh, guess who bought some product off me for the first time. So,
are you saying there's no patient confidentiality?
No, there's patient confidentiality.
Oh, sorry.
It's just a mailing list.
Confidentiality.
Well, it's a mailing list.
Are you aware my dog is taking pee, collagen, and what's the other thing he takes?
Antinol.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been on that.
Antinol is not Narelle's business, but I've got to do a shout out for Antinol. They are absolutely fantastic. They're very supportive of our show. Whenever we've done seminars and so forth, they have been first to dip their hand in their pocket. They are very generous with their product. But let me just say, all that aside, their generosity and their advertising and marketing, let me just say on the other side of that, their product is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, it does work. It's very beneficial.
For sure.
It's one of those things where they say Antinol for every dog every day. I totally agree with that. Narelle has even supported that when people have asked them about her product. She says the 2 things that I would absolutely give to you is Antinol and her Gut Protect formula.
Yeah, right.
Gut Protect is like her holy grail of
like
her
the
whole
flagship
range.
Of the range.
This is not me market talking, okay? Because
this is an ad.
This is an ad, but this is not me doing marketing.
But we've already pointed out we're shit at ads.
I know. Of all the things that she sells, and she sells some killer product, but the one thing that she does sell, which I absolutely agree with her, every dog should have this product, is the Gut Protect.
Really?
100%. It's nothing that they need for being sick. It's something that they need to do just to maintain great gut balance.
Okay.
And gut balance is like mental health. It's one of those things that you absolutely want to get control around. So products like Antinol, great for every day. Gut Protect, great for every day. There's other products that aren't even related to hers called Rosehip Vital and stuff like that. Absolutely fantastic for dogs to be on every sort of day. But I know there's other people we need to talk about. If you want to learn more about Narelle's products, go to our website, canineseuticals.com. I think it's
You'll figure it out.
It's .com or .com.au. It's one of those.
No one types that shit anyway. Everyone just Googles it and then goes,
just Google it. You'll find it.
Hey,
Yeah.
George Kittredge, I reckon we should get him on the show.
We should have George Kittredge on the show.
Yeah.
Not only is he devilishly handsome, but he's got a fantastic, one-of-a-kind product that I've never seen replicated anywhere in the world. You and me were getting a car ride by him. We got to see the prototype firsthand.
And then his bike got stolen with the prototype on it.
It did.
Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, George has Rowdy Hound Dog Box. And so it's a crate that goes on the back of your motorbike so that your dog can go everywhere with you. And it's cool as shit. It's a great idea. You should totally get one. Tailored Canines in Canada.
Yeah.
Do you know that Taylor from Tailored Canines is hosting Jazz Whiting later in the year?
I do know that. Yes, I saw the ad. Very good.
Yep.
Not only is she doing great stuff with her Tailored Canine,
her training business,
but she's also getting a fantastic trainer over there to help with her tailored training.
She is. And finally, Barbara de Groot
the sugar mama from the Heart Dog
From the
Training.
Heart Dog Training.
Just fucking throws cash at us.
Just supports the show. God bless her.
Yeah. I think later on in the year when Narelle and I are over doing a seminar with Melanie Benware, Barbara de Groot is coming over.
Wonderful.
I think she has put down a like, and I said, you better come, sugar mama, and she gave me a thumbs up. So hopefully she's going to be there and I can give her some love to repay us for all the kindness and support that she's thrown at us and ask nothing in return.
All right. That's our ad.
Yeah.
That one's good to go for at least another 4 years. You'll hear from us then. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stuart. I'm joined in studio today by my co-host, Glenn Cooke.
Hello, sir, and hello, everybody out there in internet land.
How are you?
I'm good.
Well, we've got a topic.
We have.
A couple of days ago. It was a couple of days ago? Yesterday.
Yesterday.
We were...
Yesterday, before we put this podcast out.
Yeah.
Not for people listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were live with Bill Church, Bow Wow Bill. He asked us to come on. Took some scheduling, but we figured out a time and we did it. And the three of us, three guys with microphones, talked over each other for 3 hours.
We didn't do too bad.
Yeah,
all
we did
things
all right.
considering.
We did all right.
I remember many years ago, Brent Dry actually reached out to me and he said, hey, dude, there's times where other people are talking and you just like cut them off. That resonated with me. Like anytime Brent speaks to me, I know Brent's speaking to me from the heart. That's just who he is with people. I never took it offensively. I took it constructively. And I thought, yeah, I don't want to do that to people and I don't want to be that guy. Mm-hmm. Now, when people are talking, I spend more time listening to what they have to say and what they're talking about, because there are conversations that I'm involved in where people are sharing really interesting information. And rather than listening with the intent to reply, which I find a lot of people do, they have this...
Which is natural.
It is. And they have this urgency to just speak over the top of you. When that's happening, you're not really invested in the conversation. You're invested in what you have to say. That hit home. I thought about that and I considered that. So when you made the comment the other day, it's three guys going to talk over each other on a microphone, I thought, let's not do that. If somebody's talking, they're having a good run at it, and if the topic is interesting, let that person have their run and talk about what they're talking about and listen to what they've got to say, because you might learn something and it might be relevant to your partition in the conversation as well.
Speaking of people having their run of talking,
Yep.
you, in probably the middle portion of that, if
Yes.
people wanted to go back and listen, started talking about the effect of pharmaceutical companies on the dog world. And it's something that we've sort of touched on before, because we've talked about the over-prescription of SSRIs to dogs.
Yep.
We've talked about how famously there's some veterinary behavioralists that we're aware of that have basically written the prescription before you even sit down. It certainly is a bugbear of many dog trainers because it's outside of our wheelhouse. So one of the tricky parts I've always found is when you turn up to someone's house and they tell you the dog's on meds and they say, well, do you think the dog needs meds? It's a tricky answer because you're like, I'm not an expert in this stuff. And I can say, well, I think that this is a behavioral issue and I think that we can fix this. Like the anxiety that is being caused here that we're treating with meds has actually caused by you've got this dog a lot of options. You're inconsistent in the way that you show things. You've given the dog really high payoffs for inconsistent things. So the dog doesn't know where to find its advantage and is therefore frantic over that. And so a lot of the times I've found myself saying to people, well, if this were my dog, it would never have occurred to me to even begin with meds, but I can't tell you not to take these meds. And even the path to going off these meds, that's a whole thing. You can't just cut this dog off, right? And so these are the sorts of things that are outside of my wheelhouse, whereas the training of it, plenty of times in my life, people have said, my dog's on meds because of this issue. And I am faced with the position where I say, well, I've trained that same issue plenty of times without use of meds. And similarly, like I'm about to do the same thing with your dog, but now we're in a position where we go, well, the meds knock the edge off it and you were able to train it is an easy answer.
Yeah.
And the problem is, I think as well, those situations absolutely do exist. And I think probably only 3 times I can remember saying to an owner of a dog, like, hey, I'm out of my depth. Like this isn't working the way that I think it should work. One time that really sticks in my mind, like I can remember the smell in the room. It was like a very strong memory of me looking at this Kelpie that was just a fucking mess. And every trick that I had about trying to get into this dog's head was not working. And I ended up saying to the owner, hey, this isn't a dog trainer issue. This is a veterinary behavioralist issue. You've got to go see someone.
Which is a responsible thing to do.
Yeah. And so I've only done that a few times. I think I can only remember doing it 3 times. That's not to say that I haven't done it more times, but one in particular where I was like, oh, I don't know what the fuck is happening here. I'm out of my depth. And it wasn't early in my career either. Like it was at a time where I really was effectively training many dogs, and this one was beyond me. We've had a history of talking about meds on the show and the influence that they have on dogs, and for sure that we believe that, and I think most dog trainers sort of to an extent agree that there's an overprescription of meds. You had sort of an interesting take on that you brought up during Bill's show.
Before we get into this, I just want to sidestep into another story where I feel now it's a safe enough time to discuss it without the backlash that I would have got years ago.
Oh, dear.
I never got vaccinated during the entire COVID process. I have told people, I've told groups of colleagues and friends, it cost me some friendships.
Because of most of our listeners outside of Australia, it's worth pointing out the vaccination rate in Australia was in the 90%.
Yeah,
right?
It was huge.
Because we're forced to.
Yeah, even though they said it's at your choice.
Yeah, but you would lose your job. You couldn't go anywhere.
Yep, weren't allowed to fly, weren't allowed to travel, weren't allowed to have the freedoms of a human being.
Yeah, and the stores that you could go into was even limited, right? So like you could go into a supermarket
but
unvaccinated.
Not restaurants or coffee shops.
But not even like JB Hi-Fi. Like to get into like an electronics store, like a specialist store, they're like, no, you don't need to be in here. You can buy your food unvaccinated, but you can't fucking enter. Was that the case? Or was it even that you couldn't go into the supermarket?
No, you could go into the supermarkets.
Yeah. Okay.
What a wild time to live through. I know we've said this a myriad of times, but what a wild time to live through where I never imagined that I would see something like that in my life. I thought I'd see a significant war, and we have seen wars. You've been in wars. But I thought I'd see, and still possibly will, see a significant war front, but never a biological threat where we would be forcibly held captive in our homes and then told it was for our benefits, and then having all local governments around the world then following a same narrative everywhere they were going. It was just incredible to watch them literally parrot fashion saying the same thing over and over again. And for me and many of my family and some of my colleagues, we all felt the same way. Like I just thought to myself, something's not right here. I don't feel good about this. I slowly revealed to other people outside that circle, I'm not going to get vaccinated. I'm not going to have it done. And some people were starting to hit me with the, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer, you're a conspiracy theorist, all the insults that they were trading. And they were coming fast and furious from a few people. And I was overwhelmed with the fact that people that I've known for many, many years were savaging me about that and saying, well, I don't want you killing my children or my grandparents. Yeah. I said to them, I've had COVID and I lived. My doctor even said to me, he was forcibly trying to vaccinate me. I went there, he was putting pressure on me left, right and center. And he said, you better get this done or else you may join the list of fatalities. And I said, would you put your house on that comment? And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, in 3 years' time, when all this is over, when they're saying it's going to be over, and I said, because the governments are indicating that it's going to be over in 2023, and I don't know how they know that, but they're all saying it. Alan Joyce from Qantas was saying it.
That's an interesting thing that Alan Joyce, who's subsequently been fired, but or had to leave Qantas because he did such a fucking terrible job.
Yeah.
He said right when they shut down the airlines that they would be shut internationally until 2023.
Right. In a comment on air.
Yeah.
They were all saying, Daniel Andrews was saying that. He goes, I'm going to lock you up till 2023. So they had this number in mind, which made me think, how do they know this? Right back then in 2020, how do they know this? How do they know that 2023 is the magic number where COVID's just going to disappear? How do they know this? For me, I'm not an anti-vaxxer in any way, shape or form. I've had so many fucking vaccinations. I've got scars from vaccines that I've had from a kid. I regularly get tetanus vaccines. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I don't even subscribe to that. And I didn't try and stop people from getting the vaccine. I said to them, I've got reservations. I don't feel right. There's something resonating deep within my soul that this isn't right. I just don't trust this system. And I don't really trust what's going on here. So I decided that I wasn't going to do it and I was going to suffer the negative punishment that they were putting down on us. Like all the things that we talk about as dog trainers, and I'm revealing something which is quite a depth of vulnerability here. And there still might be people that hear this now and might be angry with me thinking you're treacherous for not doing this. And
you're a disease rat.
Yeah. But I've had COVID, right? And that's what I said to my doctor. I had COVID. I've had it twice. So I've had two significant forms of COVID. I had alpha COVID and I had Omicron COVID. So I've had some pretty heavy bouts with COVID and never died. I got sick. I didn't like it. And it's not that I don't believe in COVID. I fully believe in COVID. I always believed in COVID. I believed it was a real thing. I never believed it started in a wet market in Wuhan. I'd never believed that at all. I believed that it was man-made, constructed in a lab. But that's my theory. I don't want this to become the COVID show because I'm quite frankly, I'm sick and fucking tired of talking about it. What I'm talking about is my concern with the power that was misused against us and the control mechanisms that were put inside and how it's changed us as a society. Like I can see significant change in the way that people interact with each other, the mistrust that people have with each other since COVID. It's forged a new society. What we were before COVID is not what we are on the other side of it. A good example of that, IACP is completely different from what it was pre-COVID to what it is post-COVID. Even traveling around the world doesn't seem the same anymore. It doesn't seem like the joyous thing it used to be. Like there are so many different things. I'm not saying it's the IACP's fault or anything. I'm just saying this is a result of...
There was massive change to all sorts of infrastructure that hasn't gone back to normal.
That's right. It never really reset properly. And we're all enjoying the freedoms. And people might say, well, that's because everyone got vaccinated, you fool. But now I've got friends who have got genuine injury from vaccines. I've got people and family, my chiropractor and so forth, who have got vaccine-related injury. And most of them will say, that's not true. That's just something that they had beforehand. But now AstraZeneca has come forward and saying, yeah, well, it's true that people will possibly get blood clots. Now they're owning up to it. Now it's starting to come out of the woodwork. Now imagine that. Imagine the fucking horror of that, of trusting the people who are pushing you and using negative punishment against you and betraying you and forcing you to get it and saying they're safe, they're safe, they're safe. All your government leaders, they're safe, they're safe, they're safe. Fucking puppets with a hand up their ass telling you they're safe. Now they're saying, sorry, you've got the vaccine that causes some issues. But it's a very small chance of that happening. How do you know whether you're the fucking unlucky roulette number that comes up in that? Anyway, I decided not to do it. Many of my family decided not to do it. What I was very fortunate about was that I was in a good group of people who decided not to do it, like if everybody else wants to do this. And as I said, when I opened up in this whole conversation, I didn't say it to people either way. I didn't say you should get vaccinated or you shouldn't get vaccinated. I just said, it's your body, it's your temple. You decide what's best for you. And I knew people that said, I want to go overseas or I want to see my parents or anything like that, so I'm going to go and get the vaccine. I just said, do what makes you feel right. And then they would say, doesn't that make you feel like you should do it? And I said, there is a side of me that thinks this is a fast track to getting the things I want. And I said, but I also know how negative punishment works as well. I'm confused at the world narrative that you don't have to get this, but yes, you really do, because we'll take everything away from you if you don't. So I said it's an ultimate game of punishment. So now I get into the original topic, now that we've gotten away from that whole discussion. And I've really been looking at the incredible change that's happened in my dog training experience and how we've suddenly got into this narrative where we've become the enemy. In the lens of many of these people around the world, the balance trainers, the people who are continuing and holding the hard line that we want to use tools, we're becoming an enemy in the public arena. And that's confusing to me. Because when I look at it as we're the saviors, we're good people, we're people who really deeply care about the well-being and the livelihood of many of the dogs that we're working with. And I think about the aches and pains of my body, like the genuine aches and pains that I have in my hands and my arms, my shoulders, everything like that, for all the dogs that I've been managing, handling, working with, the clients that I've been sweating over, the genuine tears that I've shed for them and their dogs, like genuinely crying over other people's dogs because I'm fucking so frustrated about the shit that they've had to go through with it. Dog training can be so rich and so rewarding, yet it can be so psychologically bending at times where it can either break you or it can bend you so hard you can see the splinters forming in your soul.
I think the whole animal industry is like that, right? That's why we see such high suicide rates amongst vets.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That whole concept, it's super frustrating to me that when you perceive that what you've done in your life's work, or even a large part of your life, when you're dedicating that time to them, why then are governments turning against us? And they are. because they're making up laws to take tools away from people. And literally, that's an admission that we're bad people, because why would you want to use a tool that we want to outlaw and we think is horrible and it's cruel? With no real research put into it, it's just the vindication of the popular percentage. It just doesn't make sense to me. So then I started really looking at it. And as I was talking to you when we were outside before we switched the mics on, there's two quotes that I often think about all the time. And these resonate in my head quite regularly. And it did with COVID. It came up a lot of the times during COVID, and it's also in business as well. That is, if you really want to know who owns you, find out who you can't criticize. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go too far up the chain to work out what happens when you criticize certain people, because things can happen to you. You can lose your job, you can lose your house, you can sometimes lose your life, depending on what country you are, where you are. People do have control over you. Mm-hmm. The other quote was, if you want to know where something's going, follow the money trail. The remarkable thing is, I keep thinking about how come these people are so adamant about it. Is it because they've been conditioned and trained to do it? Or is it because there is an MO for this group of people that they basically think to themselves, I own this massive company now. I'm the CEO, or I'm a shareholder, or whatever I am, in a position of authority or movement or responsibility within an organization. So just to step slightly to the right of that, you and I are both business owners. Mm-hmm. Well, Narelle's a business owner. I work for a business. Mm-hmm. You know, it's my job to generate income and service clients for a company, and that's what I've been doing for many years. You're your own business person. You've got your business, your courses. You tell me, as a business owner, really what is the ultimate goal of your business?
Wow. Mine is kind of different because I have weird issues with money, but
you've still got to survive, right?
Yeah. Like the business has to be profitable.
Right. So ultimately, and I'm not trying to trap you into agreeing with me, it's common. Mm-hmm. When I think about Narelle's company, she's doing everything that I know of as ethical as she possibly can be. She's being as transparent as she possibly can be with everybody, apart from telling everybody exactly what her ratios are, because that's
proprietary.
That's proprietary, right? That's not that she doesn't want people to know. She's telling people exactly what's in it, just not how to blend it and do it. What she's doing is basically saying, hey, here's everything that's in the product. Here's white papers of science that support what I'm saying to you. I mentioned that when we were in the interview with Bill as well. Like, it's not me, once again, just trying to do a marketing thing for Narelle, because I'm looking at it from an ethical standpoint of what she's trying to do. The only people that she really has to suffice in this is mainly herself and me. So we need to look at it from a survivability point as well. There's no point in doing this, A, if the product is shit and you're hurting animals or hurting whoever you're trying to look after, or B, if you're losing money. So if you're looking at designing a company, and the reason why most companies go out of business within the first 5 years is because people aren't thoughtful enough about it. They just think, I just want to start a business. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to get a website and I'm going to do all these fancy things. And then they throw a whole bunch of cash behind it. And it might be an absolutely brilliant idea. It might not have been marketed well, or it might be that they just can't raise the capital that they need in the time that they need it. So I've known people that they were literally going to be the next great thing in whatever industry they were going to be in, but they just couldn't raise the capital in time. They literally ran themselves out of money, and that's why it fell apart. It wasn't that the product was no good. It was just that the timing was
businesses usually fall apart for cash flow problems.
It's a cash flow problem. That's exactly right. Let's look at this from a broad scale where we're not talking thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars or even low millions of dollars, but we're talking about multiples of billions, even trillions of dollars. The idea is still exactly the same, except on a mass scale, where you've got to appeal to private equity who are funding you, or you've got to appeal to shareholders, or God forbid, who knows who. But those people are still driving you and saying this year and next year are pretty much paralleling on a financial scale. What are you going to do to drive up profits? Like, how are you going to make sure that the next financial year is showing between a 5 and a 12% gain in profit?
Yeah.
How are you going to do that for me?
Before you carry on, it's something that we have talked about on the show, but it's something I didn't really understand until relatively recently, and it's worth explaining, is that once a company is public, like you can buy shares in it, it has to keep creating a profit, and not just a profit, more profit every quarter than the one before. Otherwise, why would you buy shares in that company? Like, why would you put money into it? And then if they don't turn a profit and they do that, say, multiple quarters in a row, like 2 in a row.
It's only 2 quarters.
Yeah. Then what's going to happen is people who hold those shares are going to sell those shares. And a fucking enormous company can fall apart in seconds if that happens. And we spoke about this briefly on the show in the past. It's why we sort of scrambled to get a mailing list going, because Facebook didn't turn a profit for a quarter. And not too many people understood what a huge deal that was. Now, it was because they overinvested in the Oculus system. Like, there was a reason and they justified it. But it's a big deal. Netflix, for example, didn't turn a profit, and they said that maybe everybody who's ever going to get Netflix has got Netflix. And that nearly collapsed Netflix, because then all the investors are like, well, why would I keep my money here? I'm going to pull my money out as quickly as possible. And then all the shares are suddenly worth nothing because everybody's selling them and the company can collapse. So like, that really can happen. It took me a long time to understand that. It's only in the last 5 years that I've actually understood that a multi-billion-dollar company can fall apart in a day if there's a run on selling the shares. And if everybody decides they're getting out on the same day, it's fucked. The stock can tank, and therefore the company can collapse very, very quickly.
If you ever want to see how markets can be easily manipulated, there's 2 good movies that I recommend you have a look at. One's called The Big Short, and the other one, a recent one that was on Netflix, I can't remember the actual name, but it's about the company GameStop in the United States. Fascinating. And absolutely disgusting, the people behind the scenes who are literally trying to fuck everybody over, how they were trying to turn off the system so they wouldn't go broke themselves, because they were basically playing everybody.
They got caught, and then a bunch of nerds managed to rally enough people together to turn the table.
Isn't it remarkable?
Yeah.
But that's the thing is, I'm not talking about this in the fact that there's no hope and you can't do anything about it, because you look at people like Gandhi and other people around the world who have rallied enough people power, and they've changed history. Like, they've forcibly stopped people from being able to lead these industrial campaigns to fuck people over. That's primarily what I'm trying to say. To get back in the story, it got me thinking, they've got to come up with regeneration all the time. They've got to think of new leads, new ways to market. An important point as a caveat on this, once again, as I mentioned before, and this is the circle back to the whole point about my vaccination story, I'm not anti-vaccination, and I'm not anti-medication, and I'm not anti-pharmaceuticals. Some of the comments that people have to know both about Narelle and I, even though Narelle is highly involved in natural medicine and it's a very big and dear part of her life, neither one of us, if we need antibiotics, like if we know that that's going to be something that we have to do, we'll take antibiotics. If I know that I need a certain type of medication I need to be on, I'll take the medication. Narelle will look at everything about it. Even when she's prescribing a remedy for a client, a dog or a person, she'll look into it to make sure it's not going to be contraindicated based on the medication that they've got. And what she wants to make sure is what she's doing is complementary to what they're doing. And she never advises people, get off this or just do this. She always says, talk to your doctor. Make sure you're working with your medical professional. Make sure that you're following their advice. Make sure that you're not going to hurt yourself. Make sure that if you want to come off something, that it's done with the guidance of the person who put you on it in the first place. In saying that, I need people to understand this, is that I'm like you when you told your first story about that Kelpie that you went round and saw and understood it was a mess and there was little that you could actually do with it, and you recommended this is possibly a time that this dog needs to be on some form of medication. I heard Dr. Michelle Rasool talking about it a while ago. I've known Michelle prior to her being a vet. She was introduced to me through Brent Dry and Cat. I think this was back in the days where I first met Rihanna.
Right.
When we were raising money to get a dog for Rihanna's son. That's how I first met Ree. We were doing sort of like this collaboration that Brent and Kat put together, and it was beautiful. It was a lovely gathering of dog trainers, and it was a seminar, group speakers, I think me, Boyd, there was lots of people there. Yeah, I met Michelle back then. She was learning how to be a vet. I think she'd done NDTF, if memory serves. And more recently, I've been listening to her talking on a couple of interviews that she did where she talks about medications, SSRIs, as medicine. You know, it's medicine that some dogs need. Like most responsible people, she's not into the mindset that you need to overprescribe. But if it's needed, it's needed. And mate, I can tell you, there's certainly dogs that I've seen where I've looked at them and I thought, there's little that I can actually do here. I think what we need to do is explore medication. I think we need to look at putting your dog on something with a behavioural vet. And I've recommended good and thorough behavioural vets that I know have ethics. They're not just the sort of person who gets the dog in the room and basically is just writing a prescription. They are taking blood tests. They're looking at the dog. They're consulting the clients. They're even asking me and other dog trainers around Australia, like, what did you see? Why did you recommend the dog come here? What's happened? They spend time going in depth with the client. I can even say this of my own personal doctor, the same one who was trying to force me to get vaccinated. He is not fast to push me onto antibiotics, which is quite ironic that he was with one and not with the other. But even with antibiotics, like he'll say, let's try it without antibiotics so we don't create an antibiotic issue, which I appreciate in him as well. And I like that about when I'm working with vets as well, that they're not over-prescribing medication. Our own vet does that with Ladybug because she gets a shit ton of UTIs. She is reluctant to just put her on medication unless she needs it, unless there's nothing that she can do to help her fight off the infection. She needs to be on antibiotics. That's the way things are. Getting back to this original point that's been frustrating me so much, I kind of looked at it from the 50,000 foot point of view to think to myself, am I being ridiculous about this? Am I just developing a bias because I'm angry and that tools are being taken away? And is that really the driving force behind this? Or is there something really in this? So I went into ChatGPT, and I understand that ChatGPT has some biases as well, and the information which people can say and will probably be thinking to themselves as they're listening back to this. ChatGPT isn't perfect, and it can give you some false narratives sometimes. I've even subscribed to that. But as a business model, with a lot of things that I've put in there with ChatGPT on business models, the information I've got back is remarkable. And in fact, it saved me hundreds of hours sometimes, I would say, over the time that I've been using it, of just being able to generate some really articulate work. I asked it this question. I literally spent probably an hour putting all the parameters into it of just building it line by line, like saying, I need you to pretend that you're the CEO of a pharmaceutical company, that you've got shareholders, you've got investors in the organization. You need to turn a profit every quarter. You've literally saturated the market. And it was more for behavioral side medication. So I built the parameters out in it. I spent a long time doing it. Not surprisingly, at the end, where it suggested...
What was the question that you put to it? What specifically what was the problem it had to solve?
The problem it had to solve was, what do you need to do to ensure survivability and a turn in profit every quarter in regards to selling your behavioral modification medicines?
Okay.
Primarily at the end, it started saying that it would ensure that it worked with the collaboration of vets, professional trainers and influencers to canvass the market. Fundamentally, it was building out that it would do whatever it needed to do to remain profitable by influencing and collaborating and supporting and funding a large market of primarily anybody it could to saturate the market with its product. I thought to myself, these people, do they understand the third parties that are involved in this? Do they understand that perhaps they're a pawn in a financial game here where they're literally being controlled and manipulated and modified based on a model that's been set in place to create and generate profit?
No, they don't at all.
See, that's the point that I'm that's the point that I'm dying inside on, and that's the point where I keep sticking on, and it's the point that I keep becoming very sad and frustrated on, because I keep thinking, why are we losing ground when I believe that the logical and plausible argument that we keep putting out here and we keep banging our heads on the table about every single time, but I just don't think we can fight the money.
Okay, you're still being a little bit cryptic. Lay it out for us what you think is happening. Let me steel man you and see if I understand totally what you're saying.
Go for it.
You think that balanced training, effective training that will limit problems in the average pet dog, anxiety issues, let's say damaging the house while people are gone, let's say dog aggression, peculiar behaviors, all that sort of stuff. You think that there is a push from the pharmaceutical companies that create the meds for the dogs, that they are influencing or funding or driving the idea that balanced training shouldn't be allowed, and they are in part behind the banning of tools and so forth, so that training is less effective and therefore more meds are needed.
Well, let me ask you this counter question. If you're invested in selling medication as a third-party operative, who's the enemy to your market?
Yeah, people who make it unnecessary for dogs to have it.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that's where I kept coming back to all the time. So when I kept looking at it objectively, because I kept having Pat Stuart on my shoulder while I was doing this, because I kept thinking, when I put this to Pat, he's going to fight me on this. Naturally, not in a...
Yeah, but I want to answer all the questions. I want to
Yeah.
plug all the gaps.
Good, and so you should. I think the more that I've matured in this over time, I've learned to construct a better argument with it and try and remove my bias from it, because I kept coming into this thinking, okay, I'm biased. That's why I'm angry about this, and this is why I'm feeling frustrated about this. I don't believe it's a part of bias anymore. I just can't understand why I keep losing to this. Then people who are listening once again, because again, please believe me, I understand how this sounds. People are going, well, you don't like losing. That's your problem. Mm-hmm. It's not a matter of me losing. I don't think I'm losing because I will still have a job. I mean, I don't have to train another dog for the rest of my life, and I can still be involved in the pet care market and still have a job. Mm-hmm. So I'm not losing.
Yeah. So like, to be clear on that, your actual job here, those kennels, whether balanced training exists or not,
they'll still be filled with
people
dogs.
are still going
and
on
cats.
holidays.
Yeah.
People are still putting their dogs in kennels.
That's right.
Your survivability, your profit margins within as a company doesn't rely on training. Training is very much training is very much
Training's a bolt-on.
Yeah.
Training is a sideline interest that the company likes to have. It's basically the fries to the order. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that in a dismissive way, because we're a company that believes in training.
Yeah.
From myself right up to their head. They see the need for it. They agree with it. They like the vision of training. They always wanted to have it on board with the company. That was never an issue. Let me get back to the side of this conversation where I keep thinking about people thinking that I'm complaining that I'm going to lose something. I'm worried about dogs in general. I'm worried about society, because I can see over that framework, when you're looking at it through the window, you can see that the time scale of how many dogs now are on medications or medicines or pharmaceuticals or whatever you want to call them. There's an abundance of dogs that come in here that are on medication. If I rewind the clock and go back, let me go back 2 decades, you would not have seen 1/10 of those dogs would have been on medications, and they would have been on medications for maybe a virus or something like that, where it's fighting an infection. It wouldn't be on behavioural modification medicines.
Yeah.
The amount of children that I'm seeing on behavioural modification medicines has escalated in my time frame. That's a much bigger thing in my life time scale compared to what it was. But because I'm not really invested in the education of children or the training of children or knowing much about the scale of children, I don't really have much of a window into that. But with dogs, I do. What's alarming me, if I'm making this clear, and I feel like I'm babbling a bit here now, but what's alarming me is I feel like we're getting things taken away from us because we've got a controlling, overarching monopoly who's basically directing and has a shadow interest in stopping things that interfere with its agenda to make profits. As Narelle has said to me in the past, just follow the logical course of the science behind it, or look at the logical course. And if you do look at the logical course, I don't really feel that you can't understand or can't grasp that this is actually what's happening to us. We're being trained in very much the same way with the same psychologies that we're training dogs. And again, that's getting back into my original COVID story, because I felt like that was a massive control and training model that was unleashed onto the world. It's not that I don't believe in COVID. I just can't understand how that fucking thing happened. And then COVID just vanished from our life and nobody cares about it anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, even if you come to work with COVID, it's like, oh, well, you just got COVID. Who cares? Even the vaccinated people who were all told you won't get COVID if you get the vaccines all got COVID multiple times and are still getting COVID. That must be frustrating to a lot of people. They must look at that and go, well, why does that happen? It's also the blind defense that comes with it and goes, yeah, but I'm not getting it as severe as what I would have got it on the other hand. I got COVID. It was unpleasant. Didn't tickle. It hurt. But I know people who got much sicker than I did with COVID, much sicker, and they got vaccinated 3-4 times.
Definitely affected individuals differently, that's for sure.
It did, and all diseases do. I understand that. But I don't understand what's happening to us.
Okay,
I don't understand this grand change that seems to have happened, unless it's always been that way and I've only just become awakened to it.
So was I right in your opinion, what I said of what you think?
Yes, you were.
Okay. One thing that we've talked about, we have to confront that. I'm on board. Well, let me take a step back. I think that when I look at my Facebook, when I look at the people who are the most hardcore conspiracy theorists in my people that I get to see talk about what they're into, a lot of dog trainers are conspiracy theorists. And I've had this conversation with Jane, my wife, a few times about like, I think it's because we see behavioral patterns. Like we're fairly well trained in how to manipulate behavior. And we see the manipulation of behavior. And then when you're like, hang on, if you have to manipulate me into feeling a particular way, like maybe you're trying to make something happen rather than letting something play out. Something that I'm bought in on, and we've talked about in the past, is that we believe that PETA, you don't need to believe this, it's written on their website, they don't want people to own pets. Right?
Yeah, Ingrid Newkirk designed her organisation or a company or whatever you want to call that under that mandate.
Yeah.
She made it abundantly now they try and fluff that over and they try and pull the curtains around that.
Yeah.
But behind those curtains, the pillar, etched into the pillar of PETA.
Okay, but so then we say that the overarching villain in our story here is the pharmaceutical companies that are trying to make a profit. That's your position. And then they are influencing the groups that they can.
But they don't see themselves as being a villain, though.
No, of course not. But
it's the villain in the story.
Yeah, in the
but
story.
all they are to themselves is we've just
Profit-making machine.
We just got to keep making profit. We've got to keep making.
So in their attempt to continue to make a profit, they are then facilitating the people who would ban the training that would make their product less desirable, less usable, less necessary. Surely then they're at odds. What do you have to say about that? Do you think that's a battle they're just going to cross that bridge later on? Or is it incongruent that the pharmaceutical companies want everybody to have pets and they want all of those pets on SSRIs, but their ally in the getting everybody on SSRIs doesn't want anybody to have pets and they want to reduce ownership of dogs? Where's the congruence there? Do you see that as a potential flaw in the way that we're perceiving things?
That's an interesting concept. I don't know if I agree that they're aligned together.
Okay.
Because I feel that most likely PETA would be a standalone organisation that believes that they're on their own island, conducting their own.
Okay, so then who do
MO.
you think is the next step? Like when the pharmaceutical companies sit around, when the evil villain sits around the board table and they go, we have to come up with a plan of this. Like you gave ChatGPT the same set of parameters as they potentially face.
Yep.
And it said, well, we need to influence people to not train a particular way whereby they need our product. Who do you think the pharmaceutical companies specifically are talking to? What's step one?
Governments and vets.
Okay, so you think that it's direct to government. That's another
direct
set
to
of
government.
clause into
Absolutely.
governments. Okay.
Yeah. 100%. The jaw dropper for me, not that I didn't understand it was going to happen, the jaw dropper for me was when the Palaszczuk government made it a particular mandate on her agenda to remove prong collars.
Yeah.
Rather than a backbencher in one of her groups bringing it up because they're an animal advocate and they're involved in some way in animal advocacy. Why did she bring it up?
That is an especially good point in that ban in Queensland came from nowhere and based on no evidence.
Yeah.
It just popped up one day and it was a Saturday morning that it got announced via Instagram or like via social media.
I know there's been a very squeaky wheel in Queensland. There was a lady up there who was anti-remotes and anti-prong collars for a very long time, but it just struck me, like, why does this particularly take interest? The Premier of Queensland, why did it become her personal agenda? Like, I've never known.
So for our American listeners, the Premier of a state in Australia is the equivalent of a governor in your state.
Senator, I think, isn't it?
No, governor for them.
Governor, okay, yep.
Yeah. So the leader of the state within the state government, the elected official, just suddenly decided one Saturday morning that prong collars are getting banned.
So it really made me think, are we that much of a tradable commodity where things can just be taken from us that quickly? And it didn't seem to matter what the contrary was. It didn't seem to matter how many clients came forward and said, hey, this is fucking life-changing for my dog. Don't you understand? The one point that I can never shrug or get it out of my head when I'm thinking about this, when I'm in a clear state of mind and I'm even meditating on this, is I've never met one person in my 30 plus years of training dogs that I've recommended a prong collar to that's ever come back to me and said, you You've given me something that's hurt my dog, ruined my dog, put my training backwards.
Yeah.
Nothing, mate. That's the absolute issue that every time I close my eyes when this is in my mind, I can't stop thinking about that. And this is what generated this whole big polywaffle of a discussion that we're having now because I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
I can't stop thinking about how did this happen? How did we get here? And why are we letting this happen? When you look deeply into other things, I'll give you an example. I've been watching Clarkson's Farm, which I think is fucking brilliant. Jeremy Clarkson, who was on Top Gear, he's got a show on Amazon where he's bought a farm over in the Cotswolds or something like that over in England. I understand that Jeremy Clarkson's not certain people's cup of tea. They find him a bit arrogant or a bit of a douchebag. And
I'm one of those people.
Yeah, I
can't stand him.
I know. We've had this discussion. He's a celebrity and he's probably a bit of a windbag in a certain amount of things. And he's probably one of these people who's always got an idea or an agenda and he could be a pain in the ass neighbour to live next to. I get that. And looking at it from the 50,000 foot point of view, when you think about it, regardless of how funny he can be on the show, you kind of look at it, well, what if I lived next door to this clown? Like, what if that happened?
Or what if it was my company that he was tanking with his lies?
Right.
Carry on.
So the point is, what he has done in that show is he's really brought to light how screwed over farmers are being across the world.
Yeah.
He really has suddenly shone a light on how governments around the world really aren't looking after the people who look after our food bowl.
Yeah.
And why is that? Why did things become so incredibly expensive? Governments aren't to blame for all the weather conditions or the reason that certain things happen. That's outside their control. But there are a lot of things within their control that seem to really inhibit farmers around the world from being able to farm properties or be involved in their property. One thing that was really interesting on that show was the level of malevolence that the local council showed towards him. And you could tell that they were using their influence and their power to certainly pick him out. And it's because they didn't like who he was and they didn't like the fact that he was on the show. And he did call some of them a bunch of idiots and so forth, but they were taking it out of him. So that's a complete corruption of their capability. Now, again, I'm not in the room. I don't know everything that he's done. I don't know all of those specific talking points or topics that came up inside a council. But I do know when I have been involved in groups before how they like to manage people and how they look at people as we will just tell them what and how it is. Even when you're elected by your own group of people, something changes within you where you think, well, I'm going to do the best by you to tell you what to do without your consult. And even if you grumble about it, I'm going to see you as being a problem, not as being a colluder or anything like that. They kind of look at you like, now you're being a problem because you're not agreeing with me when I'm trying to do the right thing by you. But in this case, you know, like he wanted to build a farm shop and he wanted to build his car park. And there are other farms in the area who are all allowed to do this. Then he wanted to put a farm track in there. He's got an advisor in who said, yep, this is all in the law, providing you do it this way. This is the workaround that you're doing. At every fucking hook and turn in the show, they were throwing up stopgaps to him. And I kind of just thought to myself, have a look what a small local government can do to a powerful celebrity and the influence that they have over it. Isn't that just remarkable that can happen?
Like, I'm with you in sentiment, but
Yeah.
I just think that he's a lying piece of shit. And so that probably never happened. He probably created all of that. Like, if they have to create drama in a TV show, I wouldn't put any credence into anything Jeremy Clarkson has to say on a TV show.
Have you watched the show?
No, never.
Watch it.
But I saw, did you know what they did with Top Gear with the Tesla? You know, have you heard about that?
Yes, I did.
They scripted that it breaks down. And they did that when Tesla was a starting company. Now, I'm not like defending Daddy Elon and making sure that his company goes all right, but Jeremy Clarkson is a known fucking liar and creates drama on TV in order to make people watch TV, not present the truth. The truth and his TV show seldom align. Well, that was the case with Top Gear. Like, I've never watched this other show, but like, I get the sentiment. I agree with you in sentiment, but I just wouldn't put too much weight into anything that he has to say.
Certainly the time that I've been involved in anything to do with media or anything to do with influencing is that you can put out a positive piece of news and you'll get like 4 likes in it. But if you put out something there of drama or conspiracy or something that delegates danger or anything like that, it attracts so much more attention.
There's got to be a reason to pay attention.
Look at how many people are already pushing you to do the positive punishment course.
Yeah, which I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to the original point because I think I agree with you to an extent. I think I do. I think that is absolutely not outside of the realm of possibility. I think that that's highly likely. But I think one of the things that I find myself referring to this less and less is that I think I believe in Occam's razor as much as possible, where the most obvious and simple solution often is the case.
Right.
But one thing that I learned pretty early on in my army career, I held a top secret clearance. I worked in a special forces unit. I worked within the niche capabilities of that special forces unit. I've worked with government agencies of all the 3 letters from various parts of the world. There was a time where I was an action guy involved in that space. And what I always knew then, but I believe less and less each day now, is that you shouldn't attribute to conspiracy what can be attributed to incompetence, because the governments across the world are full of incompetent people.
Oh, no doubt.
I had a boss at one time explained, we have a tolerance of 10% morons in this unit. 10% of these SF, highly trained, these are the most elite soldiers. And this is true of every elite unit around the world. 10% of them shouldn't be there. 10% of them are fucking idiots that somehow managed to get in. And that's with a very stringent selection criteria, right? So you can extrapolate that to be even higher in various government departments. And there are people for sure who have a malicious intent in their actions, but there are other people who are just dummies and don't think through their actions, or are very Dunning-Kruger and are very sure that what they have said is true. And within the very narrow scope of knowledge they have, it's very true. They'll pass a lie detector. They're correct, but they're dummies and they don't know what else is going on. So I think while I in part agree with you, I think that that's highly likely that there's an influence down the chain that says, hey, we need training to be less effective because we want the meds, which is the answer to the less effective training or the absence of effective training, to fill that space. And the more dogs we get onto this stuff, the higher the profit margins. I'm with you. I can totally draw that bow. I definitely can. I think as well there's a lot of other influence.
While you're saying that, and it just comes to mind, I don't think this is an act of being malicious. I just think we're
Profits.
in the way.
We're
just in the way.
Yeah.
And the idea of when something's in the way of profit in the company, what you do is look at removing it at all costs.
Yeah.
And you need to. You kind of think, how do I reduce the impact that's happening while I can increase profits and decrease risks?
Well, the maliciousness then, certainly I agree with you. I think that pharmaceutical companies want more people taking pharmaceutical drugs, for sure. That's the model. You've got
the malicious side is that we've been painted to be the enemy.
Yeah, but that's been done, I think, from multiple fronts, in that I think that, as we sort of just teased apart then, that if there's a push to get more dogs onto SSRIs, that's not in line with Peter's less dogs, right? We don't want people owning dogs. And what we see in government as well is it's becoming more and more difficult to own dogs. And as we talked about, what's happened in South Australia is that they haven't actually banned anything. What they've done is tighten the conditions around it. And now I can't remember the exact numbers, but if your registered dangerous dog bites someone in the street, you're up for over $100,000 fine. And so what they're doing is making it to people let's not get a dog. When Johnny, the 10-year-old, says to mum and dad, let's get a dog, and they do a little bit of research, okay, what's involved in this? What risks are we taking on? They're like, oh, fuck, I'm not accepting this level of risk if we get a dog. So there's certainly multiple things that are affecting our ability to do what we do, to train the way that we train, to be effective with dogs, and they're not all congruent with each other. One is owning of less dogs, and there's certainly a push for that, and another is more dogs but less training and more SSRIs. I think as well, when we look at why do so many dogs need this, there has to be more dog trainers now. There has to be people who wear that hat and say, I'm a dog trainer of any kind, than ever before, right? Like, because it's a growing profession. I'd say that in the last 20, 30 years, it's become a totally recognized job. Like, you speak about how your grandmother, when you became a dog trainer and were like, this is what I was going to do, was like, no, that's not a real job.
Oh, she was horrified.
But now that's a really clearly recognizable, this is a profession.
Yeah.
You can be a highly professional person. You can make a lot of money. There's multimillionaire dog trainers. There's ads that keep coming up in my feed to become a 7-figure dog trainer. Right? So, like, it can happen. It's a job that you can make a lot of money from. There's lots of people doing it. I've spoken about in the past. I think that we all owe Cesar Millan a debt of gratitude for that. I think that show put into the psyche of the average person that you should get a person into your home to assist you with your dog. So, like, there's a lot to that. There's a lot of things going on in this space where I believe that there's more trainers now than ever. Pet ownership is probably at its highest, as well as the number of reactive and problem dogs that we're seeing is higher. And that's got to be multifaceted. There can't be a single answer to that, right? And I think the way that people treat their dogs, the way that dogs are being bred, the way that we're living with dogs, like in urban areas and that sort of stuff, like over the last 30 years, urbanization has changed significantly. Although I'll admit, like, say, Sydney, the city, I grew up only a few kilometers from where I live now. I was gone for a period while I was in the army, but I've lived there, mostly my whole life. In the area in which I live, nothing's really changed dramatically. There's a few new freeways, a few new buildings, but it's mostly the same. But the number of dog ownership has definitely increased in that space. So now there's like a higher population of people using the same small spaces for their dogs. We're encountering each other more than we probably have in the past with dogs because there's limited spaces to go. So I think it's a very much a multifaceted problems that we face. But I think, to your point, correct me if I understand incorrectly, is that your concern is like, yes, this is probably happening from pharmaceutical companies that are trying to maximize profits by getting as many dogs onto their things as possible. A way to do that is to reduce the instance of balanced training, which is probably going to be more effective at treating these sorts of things. The villainization of that is being done by people who don't. This is your concern.
Yes, it's a concern.
The villainization of us as balanced trainers is being done by people who are bought into the idea, like they believe it, and they don't realize.
Yeah, they don't understand. They don't understand that they've been pawned. That
they are the puppet of somebody else,
right?
And it doesn't really matter which one of those puppets is controlling the strings. All of them have a bad outcome for them. So if it's a pharmaceutical companies just want more dogs on SSRIs, that's not good for dogs. That's not good for training in general. And if it's PETA that just want less pet ownership, that's not good for them either. So they're potentially being led down the garden path by people who don't actually align, their interests don't align. But in this moment, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But then when that enemy is taken out, then what happens?
I promised this wasn't going to be a COVID show, and it's not really about COVID. It's just about altering behaviour. And the reason I bring this up is because it upsets me to quite a degree, the manipulation that went on board with this. And I look at some dear friends around the world that when I spoke to about this, I had to be really careful about not disclosing that I wasn't vaccinated because of how ferocious they were about holding the line on vaccination. I thought to myself, it's incredible of a person that I believed was so comprehensively open-minded that is now holding this hard line, and I could possibly end my friendship with this person over one reveal of just saying I'm unvaccinated. The sad thing about it, the horrifying thing about it, is the amount of those people now who have come back to me in subsequent months after it finished and said to me, I wish I never got this fucking thing in the first place. I wish I didn't fall victim to the propaganda, and I wish if I had my time again and I could go back in time, I wish I held the line and just didn't do it. And my question to them, because I've been spending time talking to people about this, and again, hadn't revealed my stance on it. I didn't want to develop a bias. For all they knew, I was vaccinated. I just said, well, why then? And they just said, I just felt there was no alternative. I just felt everybody was pushing me in this direction. Like I felt this urgency that I had to do this or else I was going to kill a grandparent, a child, lose my job. And they just felt like they had to join the team. They had to be part of the book burning brigade. I'm sad for those people. I'm fucking horrified for those people because it upsets me that that was allowed to happen and people felt like they were doing the right thing. And that's what I feel about in the same scope with this topic that I'm talking about, how we're being turned on, how we're being villainized as being the enemy in this conversation, and realizing that people may be listening to this and saying, Glenn, you're defending a position here. You're defending your right to be a balanced trainer. You're goddamn fucking right I am. And I always have. I've held this line. I remember distinctly a person in the industry many years ago said to me, you know, you could be a much wealthier person in the dog training space if you only shut your fucking mouth. For many years, that sat with me. And I just thought, I don't like being controlled by people because I realize what control is. And I talk about it freely and openly about the illusion of control. And I realize how people have done it. I've been controlled and I've been manipulated. I've been puppeteered to do things for people. You know, like when I talked with you before, some of my karate instructors and so forth, when I've looked at those people, when I've basically given them the keys to operate me and saying, I will do your bidding. Fortunately for me, I aligned myself with good people who said, that's not what this is about. You're listening to the wrong part of the story. You're taking in what you think needs to be done. It often reminds me about how people want the truth from you until you give them the truth. Classic example of that, I know it's a movie. Do you remember the movie Getting to the Greek with Russell Brand and Jonah Hill?
Yeah.
When they're in the car together, Russell Brand says to Jonah Hill, what do you think of the album African Child? Be honest with me. And he goes, oh man, that album was an absolute piece of shit. Because he thinks, you know, he thinks we're friends. You know, like he thinks we're friends. This is a vulnerable moment. I can tell you because you really want to know. I'm your friend. I can tell you. And he goes, don't you talk to me like that, you little and he just really tears strips out of him. And you can see the deep level of hurt because that was his art. He said he wanted the truth, but he didn't really want the truth. He wanted a version of the truth. He wanted his truth. That's what frightens me about knowing how to manipulate and control behavior, is how we've been manipulated and controlled. I guess that's the rub of the conversation in getting to this very long and convoluted story that I felt like I needed to tell because it's been sitting with me for so long and I've been holding back on this because I've been afraid to talk about it. But I think some bravery needs to be shown by people. And I could be wrong with this. And I generally, if people are listening to this and I haven't lost you by now, I want you to tell me if I'm wrong. I want you to listen to this and tell me, put together a good sound argument and say, no, you're off the rails, you're wrong. Here's real evidence to support it. Not something that I've just conscripted because I've bought into the Kool-Aid, but here is the evidence behind it. You're not on track with what you're thinking here.
Yeah.
Right now, I think I'm onto something. I'm not the only person. I've had conversations with people locally and internationally about this very much thing. But I think to myself, am I just listening to the same tribe of people? Have I just convinced?
An echo chamber?
Have I created an echo chamber? It's been alluded to many times. Robert Sapolsky talks about it in his books and when he's been talking online that you only need a small amount of convincing for you to believe that you're on the right track sometimes. So all you need is just one friendly person to say, no, I'm buying into it, Glenn. You're right. You're the Messiah. You've been right all along. I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to be easily led on that and just conscript a story in my head and also influence other people to think like that if I'm absolutely wrong on this, if I've derailed myself and I'm off tangent. But I just cannot explain some of these things. It doesn't make sense to me. I feel like I'm in the Matrix sometimes when I look around the world that's become from the world I knew. I just feel like I'm out of touch with it and something happened drastically and I just can't find the logical explanation to know how and why is this happening and how is it allowed to be happening.
Well, it's an interesting topic.
Hopefully.
Well, yeah, it's worth pondering. And if you're willing to take feedback on that, I think that we should open it up to the people who have made it through the show and got to this point.
Yes.
We've got the Facebook discussion group. That's a place where people can discuss this. If they think that you're totally off base, if there's a weight of evidence to go somewhere else.
You don't need to be rude about it either. Like, let me make it clear.
Yeah, like make it a real conversation.
This is not to offend you or anybody else. I'm not throwing anybody into the barbecue over this. What I am saying is this is where I've got to right now. Change my mind.
Okay.
What's the name of the guy who was famous for that?
Stephen Crowder.
Stephen Crowder. Yeah, change my mind. I'm willing to have my mind changed. I'm accepting of that. If a group of people or somebody who's not conspiring with the enemy is willing to put up a good argument and saying, here's another 50,000 foot view of this point, let's have a look and analyze it from these specifications, then I'm willing to sit down and be your student.
If we get somebody who has an articulate argument and you know how to talk, you could come on the show and rebuke.
If it's interesting enough for people. But I just feel that things have changed in a weird direction. It's alien territory to me right now.
All right. That's it for another episode of Conspiracy Theorist Cult Podcast.
A different one. Hopefully it won't turn into true crime and someone will come around and kill me.
As always, if you like what you hear, give us a like, rate, share, subscribe. Do all that through whatever subscription service you download us from. Since we're talking conspiracies, did you know they don't check whether you listen to the podcast before you rate them? So you
really? How do you know? What's your evidence?
What's
your evidence?
I've seen it happen. You could go to another subscription service and leave a review there. But I mean, just do one. Give us one. You can do it.
They might not check, but it does help our ratings.
Yeah, by listening to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and reviewing. And all of that. Yeah.
All of it.
What
helps
it does,
our bank account too if you put money into
so
Patreon.
a great way to support the show is to jump into Patreon.
Yeah.
There's a giant backlog of information in there. You get access to all of that for $3. There's live streams that happen in different tiers. Get in there, check it out. You'll see for yourself. There's a lot of value that we try and provide in there. But more than anything, you're just supporting the show and making sure that we are able to continue doing it or able to buy more cool stuff that allows us to continue doing it and keep the quality of the show to the maximum that we can get it to.
I have seen some people jumping on board recently or upping their subscription, so very much appreciated. I know for some people, like a little bit of money is unthinkable at this point in time because governments have put us into a free fall in the markets. We still love you and appreciate you anyway.
Yeah, exactly. The other way you can support the show is Teespring. You can jump into it or Spring. You can jump into it there. There's links in the show notes. You can get yourself some cool merch. We've got a bunch of cool stuff there that was all designed by cool friends of ours. If you want to get in contact with us, best way to do that is jump into the Facebook discussion group.
You just completely ran away from the tapestry.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. You can get a tapestry.
I'm sitting here just like with bated breath waiting for it, and you're just like, oh, no, let's not talk about the tapestry.
Get a giant wall tapestry. Get a huge poster, a material, like a flag, essentially.
Yeah.
Fly our flag like we're pirates in your place. Right?
As Dirty Harry would say, go ahead, make my day.
Go ahead.
Yep.
And if you want to get in contact with us and you want to tell Glenn he's right or wrong about this episode and try and promote more discussion, I want to try and be more involved in that Facebook discussion group. It's something I want to commit to trying to do, being involved in more of the conversations there. So invite us in, tell us what you think. And if you want to get in contact with us directly, you can shoot us an email. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. I love you all.